Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Depeche Mode called Spirit. So I've talked about politics and music a lot in this series. Hell, one of the first things I ever clearly delineated were my criteria for political art to work. I focused on this for some time. And initially, given the aftermath of the election last year down south, I was expecting a lot more politically themed art to erupt out of the woodwork. Artists who now have a clear and present threat erupting forth in order to make their statement. But in watching a dead-end hip-hop conversation with MC Uncommon NASA, who I've covered a couple times on this show, he puts out some great hip-hop records, he raised a few points that got me thinking in this sort of conversation. The first being is that hardship rarely precedes great art. Like it or not, when by necessity you gotta be concerned about where your next meal's coming from or whether or not you can make rent, or then your art doesn't have that same necessary focus, it can feel a little bit slapdash. And yeah, while that can work for some punks or true prodigies, that added rush to say something can also lead to ideas that aren't fully thought out or explored properly. And that's the other thing. Everybody is going to want to rush in and make some sort of statement on one side of the aisle or the other. Cash in quickly to be the standard bearers of the movement. And that means that a lot of acts who aren't normally political will try to become political, and that can have disastrous results. You look at some of the songs that were made in 2016 about the election, you can see why. As such, when I heard that long-running darkwave group Depeche Mode was breaking from tradition and releasing a more politically themed album with some social commentary, I had mixed feelings, to say the least. On the one hand, they've explored complex emotional, spiritual, sexual, and even socially relevant themes before, but the complexities of modern geopolitics are a very different animal, and I wasn't really confident they managed to bring it all together in the writing to make this work. And to further qualify this, I never really say I'm a hardcore Depeche Mode fan. I think between 86 and 93 they put out good albums, which is a longer good period than most critics will give them credit, but outside of isolated cuts before and after that, a lot of it can start to run together for me. They aren't that great or consistent. But hey, they're also an English group, probably looking to focus more on the political scene in their own country, and the longer time to deliberate probably helped this album. And Lord knows their writing has felt stale, so maybe uncharted territory would be good for them, give them some new fresh ideas. So how did Spirit manage to come together? Honestly, this feels like a work with some good intentions and a few good ideas, but it suffers in the execution. Hell, not even that it suffers. If you're a longtime Depeche Mode fan, I dare say you're probably gonna really like this project. But that might actually be directly adjacent to the main issue, that for as much as this album wants to inspire some sort of change or pivot in its audience to do something in its writing, it seems like nearly everything else on this album is either subtly or overtly working to pull the group in the opposite direction. None of which makes this project bad, but it does mean that it's lacking in a certain amount of impact, at least for me right now. So let's start off with the lyrics for a change, and as you might expect, Depeche Mode's take on this sort of politics is less about the details themselves and more about inspiring people to do something, snap out of their bubble and make a change for themselves. It's not aiming to make sharper, more detailed policy points or direct references, although you can definitely see the broad strokes materializing on the pretty damn strong opener going backwards on the regression of human emotions as technology advances, or the finger leveled against the passive onlooker on worse crime to try to excuse them, and I definitely will give them a little bit of credit for at least highlighting how very difficult or hopeless it can feel to snap people out of their stupor, especially on songs like Cover Me, where the protagonist travels to a different world only to find that nothing has really changed because nobody's done anything all that different there either. But here's the thing about a song like this, an album like this, or songs like, say, Chained to the Rhythm by Katy Perry to go completely outside the genre, they feel increasingly myopic, reflecting a lack of concern in the immediate circle, which doesn't exactly reflect the increasingly connected reality of it all. People do care outside of your bubble. Sure, you get your fair share of disaffected nihilists who don't think that anything's gonna change. This is the internet after all. But it ignores people who are actively fighting for change, and that said change can kind of work given persistence. And no three songs highlight this record's greater myopia than So Much Love, Poor Man, and Fail. In the first case is a song describing how our frontman has so much love to give his audience to help that can't help but feel a little bit self-serving in some of the delivery. The second song talking about a corporate exploitation, and a homeless man that uses more of that homeless man as a symbol than as an actual person. And the last song pretty much an admission to failure, that society has grown so desaturated and lacking in emotion that, to quote the song directly, it's futile to even start hoping. I mean, Jesus, I know that Depeche Mode has sat on the edge of goth for some time, but by the nine hells, I'm not sure that nihilist mode of action is going to get anybody inspired by anything except maybe reverse psychology. But that even presumes that Depeche Mode can even stay on the political message. Truth is that really occupies only about half the album. The rest filled with Depeche Mode mainstays that you've all heard before in dark dance floor hookups, tainted breakups, and love songs in the face of incoming ruin. But that's kind of the point. If you go beyond some of the broadly sketched ideas, this record feels like it could have been dropped at any point Depeche Mode's past 20 or so years, and it wouldn't really feel out of place in the instrumentation or the vocals or even some of the production. The skittering, cracky, fizzy beats that have plenty of texture but can feel a little bit underweight overall. The synths that feel oily and wiry unless there's a need to let them swell up with the smoky guitars, and all of which is anchored in Dave Gaughan's voice and the desperate hope that the groove can materialize to give any of these songs some looseness and actual momentum behind them. And hey, when it works, like the opposite, the ghostly horns on Going Backwards, the funeral march smolder of Worst Crime, the deep glossy swells of the synth that eventually anchors Scum and So Much Love, or even the more muscular dark wave groove that kicks in behind You Move with the great little synth line post-chorus, hell, those songs, they manage to click for me. But when they don't, the music can't help but feel like sounds and tones that I've not only heard Depeche Mode used before plenty of times, but also their successors bring in with a lot more grit and muscle and actual bite behind it. Or in a case like Where's the Revolution, a groove with such clumsy transitions that it really can't be excused at all. This is producer James Ford's first time working with Depeche Mode after working with the Arctic Monkeys and that one Electric Mumford & Sons record that we all forgot existed. And while I do think he kind of understands their sound, he's also not really doing anything beyond preserving tones that Depeche Mode have all been using since the end of the mid-90s. Now, that's not saying that from a compositional point of view, the group doesn't try a few new things in actually a bluesier direction, with Worst Crime working pretty well and Poison Heart trying for a Muscle Shoals sound and failing spectacularly. Someone really needs to take a lesson from indie country here on how to do the Muscle Shoals sound well, but beyond that, all this is very familiar to any Depeche Mode fan. And in a weird sense, it's also part of the problem. Especially with the record's ending, there's no sense of urgency or drive to actually change things for as much as it tries to. And given how the sound hasn't really evolved or shifted much, it paints the group as all the more detached from the reality going on right now. But you know what, as a whole, okay, let's get brutally honest. Did any Depeche Mode's fans honestly want them to make a more explosively political statement on an album like this? It's got the feeling of the group wanting to say something, but either unwilling or unaware of the edge lyrically or instrumentally to make it feel relevant or potent to the music scene or the social commentary scene right now. If anything, I'd recommend you just view this as another Depeche Mode project and treat the defeatist political subtext as kind of perfunctory. If you can get into the grooves here, it satisfies enough in some of that territory, albeit ground that again has been very well trod before. Now for me, I'm thinking a light 6 out of 10 and a cautious recommendation for fans, but non-fans, you won't miss much otherwise. Go back to Violator, it's so much better. It's not a bad listen, don't get me wrong, but while Depeche Mode might long for some of that spirit to come back, I just miss the innovative spark. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Got the poll up here, so all you longtime Depeche Mode fans can tell me how wrong I am. I'm actually curious where you guys fall on this, given that they've got a huge discography at this point, and they've gone pretty much with a very similar sound all the way through, so maybe there's subtleties and nuances I'm not quite picking up in the same way, but hey, I'd be happy to hear your comments. If you guys want to buy the record, if you're curious, links in the description below. And if you guys want to get more involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on the albums coming up on my schedule, and once a week for the higher contributors, you guys get to add records to my schedule. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.